All right, welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Manage to Win podcast. Today we have Robert MacPhee. He is an author, speaker, a consultant. You can find him at excellentdecisions.com. He is the author of Manifesting for Non-Gurus. Robert, thanks for joining us today.
Thrilled to be here. It's great to reconnect with you both and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So can you give us a little background on what you do and why you do it?
Sure. Well, you use some of the words that people tend to understand in terms of coaching and consulting and speaking, which is a lot of what I do. But we talked before we started recording, we used a word that I really like to use, but oftentimes people don't fully understand, which is facilitating. Because to me, when I'm coaching or consulting or speaking, what I'm really doing is facilitating change for people, helping people lean into and become more capable of making the changes that they want to make, either for themselves personally or for their organization. And I've been extremely blessed over the last 20 years or so to work with some really amazing people in the personal and professional development industry and learn from them and be able to stay connected to them. And I just love sharing all that experience, the knowledge that I've been able to acquire, the strategies and techniques that I've been able to develop. I love to continue that journey of learning, and I also love to share that with people, again, in the form of either coaching individually or groups, speaking, or facilitating in like a workshop or retreat kind of environment.
Hey, Rob, so is this the latest copy of the book?
That's the very latest copy of the book. And if people look carefully at it, if you're listening or watching the video, you can see there's actually a sticker on the book. I don't think I have one within. Oh, I do. Here's the older version. Jeff was talking about the original book was called Manifesting for Non-Gurus. And Jeff mentioned that you can find me right now at my current website, which is excellentdecisions.com. And what I tell people is I spent 4.5 years proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Manifesting for Non-Gurus is a clever title for a book, but a horrible brand. So when I was going out, I'm still very proud of the book. The book, there's thousands, tens of thousands of copies out there actually, and I get great feedback. But when I was going out and wanting to do the coaching and consulting work and work with leaders and influencers and really make a bigger difference, when I was talking about manifesting for non-gurus, I could see their eyes rolling back in their head, and it just wasn't a good messaging for what people really wanted. And about a year ago, actually, I did a full rebrand into the concept of excellent decisions, making decisions based on your vision and your values, rather than having your decisions and your actions driven by external stress and pressure, which we're so surrounded with today in this world. And I have been blown away because basically I'm doing the same work. The same models and concepts that are in the book are still the core of my work. But when I started calling it excellent decisions, the way that people respond, just in terms of saying, ooh, that sounds interesting. That sounds like something that I need more of and I need to do more of and I wish my people did more of. It made a fundamental difference in terms of the level of clients that I'm attracting to my work. And again, the influence that I feel like I'm able to have just from that little tweak of, and like you showed the book, Dave, I have thousands of these books still in a warehouse somewhere in Indiana, and I wasn't about to reprint the book. So I literally had stickers made. And when I'm meeting with a client, I take those stickers, and if I'm giving them a copy of the book, I literally just retitle the book right there in front of them. Because there's nothing in the core content. And I think, as I look at the work that you're doing, I think this is something that we're very like-minded about. There's some core, fundamental, common sense principles that are so important to integrate, and those don't change. And that really is what my book is based on. I spent a long time working with Jack Canfield, who's the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, and he wrote a book called The Success Principles. I have that one here too. I'm always sitting next to my bookshelf. Really big, thick book. It's like 600 pages or something like that. But it's the fundamentals. And part of my intention when I was working with Jack, which is when I wrote my own book, was to write a book that would be much easier to digest, that someone could pick up and say, hey, I could read this in an evening. And that's exactly what it's turned out to be. So,
well, I think the excellent decisions was great branding, because that's one of the biggest problems we've got is that leaders just struggle to make decisions. They're either at one end of the spectrum or the other. They're either making them too fast so they don't have all the detail and they're relying on assumptions, or they're procrastinating. I don't want to deal with that thing yet. And they procrastinate too long. And so they got pain. So the decision issue, I agree with you. I think you hit on something that the word doesn't come up that often, although a lot more than manifest.
Yeah.
Although we all know how to spell manifest, I still don't really know what it means. But the whole decision-making thing is huge.
It really is. It really is. And again, knowing what I know about the work that you're doing and helping people with what's driving their decisions and the attitudes and the beliefs and the habits that we all have, and how important it is, if you really want different results, to look inside and see what's driving your decisions and your actions. And it was awesome for me when I did this whole rebrand. I really didn't have to change anything, because I do work that focuses, on the one hand, on the inner work that needs to be done, but also the practical side in terms of the expression, the actions that we take and the results that we create or attract in our lives. And what I realized was that the decisions we make are the bridge between those two arenas. The thing about manifesting for non-gurus, wouldn't it be great if we could sit on the couch and light the right number of candles and chant the right mantra and meditate our way until somebody knocks on the door and everything we want shows up? But of course, that's not true. We have to take action. We have to get out there in the world. We have to make a decision and take action in order to create something new and something different. And again, the inner work, to me, is where people don't get the education. They don't get the support. They don't even understand what's going on that's driving the way they behave sometimes. So the education and the awareness is so important there. But the decision, like the point at which we make a decision, is literally the bridge from what we're thinking, all that activity in our mind, what our beliefs are, and the expression of it in the world, taking action, picking up the phone, making a call, engaging in a conversation, going for a run, whatever it is. Decision, the model I use is thought, decision, action. And it always goes in that order, in my experience. Sometimes really well planned out and really, strategic. And other times it's like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But yeah, the branding change has been profound.
But talking about that, I'm really curious about the identity piece. I'll say why in a moment. But there's so often that we make decisions that are disconnected from our identity. I think because why is that? Is it the hustle and bustle? Is it the firefighting we're doing? So we just get distracted? Are we tempted to take a shortcut? What causes us? Are you saying that every decision we make comes from our identity, which we may not be even aware of what that identity is? Or are you saying
I'm saying that's part of it. So in the model that I use, and again, it's the model that's in the book, it's been refined over the years, but it's still the same core model, which is that the way we think, all this activity we have going on nonstop. I know Jack used to ask his audience, how many of you talk to yourselves? And almost everyone raises their hand. You would say, well, there's usually someone in the audience going, talk to myself? Do I talk to myself? I don't know if I talk to myself. But we have this constant conversation, all these thoughts running all the time.
Yeah.
And to me, there's two things that are really influencing that more than anything else. One is that identity. I call it self-image, your beliefs about who you are, which most of us have gotten from a very young age. From our parents, from our teachers, from our friends, other family members, we get this image, this belief about who we are and how the world operates, most of which is completely made up, and most of which we can change if we want to, but no one ever tells us that. So that's one thing. But the point you bring up, which is critical, is that there's this other influence, and it's actually a lot of different influences that I call external influences. It's the people in our lives, our parents, our friends, our family, our boss, our coworkers, our neighbors. All these people that we're surrounded by are influencing the way we think. And then there's also a lot of other influences. There's the media, there's advertising, there's social media, billboards, we're driving, all these environments that we're surrounded by that influence the way we think. And in my experience, unless people have been around the kind of work that we do, they're not aware of how their self-image really can influence Because to me, the ideal way to live your life is to create a self-image that matches the desired result, like what you really want, how you want to live your life. Yeah. And for the most part, let that be what drives the way you think, the decisions you make, and the actions you take, so that you end up creating the kind of results that you really want. And to think that all those external influences, especially in today's world, are going to go away is crazy. Right? I still have a boss. I still have neighbors. I still have parents. I still have siblings. I still have, advertising and social media that's bombarding me all the time. Those external influences don't go away. But to me, the reason I love to be engaged in a conversation like this is someone could be listening who's never really looked at it this way and can have this eye-popping, life-changing experience called, oh, yeah, that's the way it works. I do have all those external influences. I am letting them run my life, but I don't have to. I can go back to my own self-image, what's really important to me, and let that start being at least more of a driver of the way I think and the way I act.
Yeah, and it's interesting for me, having seen it in your book and then in your videos more recently that I glanced at, and then I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I don't know whether you've seen that.
I have not.
Yeah, so it's a recent one that came out. And basically he one of the points he makes is that your habits stem from your identity. So it really builds on, or repeats, a lot of what you're teaching. He's saying, and so he talks about, if you build what you just said, you have an identity or you choose an identity. Like you're out of shape, but you decide, okay, my new identity is I'm an athlete.
Right.
Then each time you do something, okay, I walked 2 blocks today. I'm an athlete. It reinforces the habit that you're building reinforces the identity.
Yeah. And health and fitness is in my experience, the simplest model to really see how this all works, because you get very little pushback, very little argument on the value of health and fitness, first of all. And second of all, if someone really is committed to being healthier, it's not that hard. Like when you get to the point, like if you make a commitment that you're going to make more money, depending on where you're at now and what your skill sets are and what your resources are, it can be pretty difficult and pretty complicated to strategize and get through that hole. But if you make a decision today that you want to be healthier, it's really not that complicated. It's called move more and eat less, right? I mean, on some level. So those are like the perfect example. But again, like you said, someone makes a decision, they're going to change that self-image, they're going to change that identity. There's another concept that comes up in my model, like people have, I'm sure everyone's heard the expression comfort zone, right? Like, oh, you need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to, create a new comfort zone. And
but I like my comfort zone.
I know everyone does. Everyone does. Even if we don't like the results, we like our comfort zone. It's
Sure.
weird. But this model that I teach, and again, I actually just redid a video. It's going to be posted in the next week or so, explaining this model that we're talking about, because I just want to start giving that away. I want as many people as possible to start understanding that. I believe that it will lead to people being more interested in working with me because, well, first of all, the way I define a comfort zone is when your identity, to use your language, identity, I call it self-image, but when your beliefs about who you are and what's important to you and how the world works, when that matches the current results that are showing up. So if somebody's 50 pounds overweight and they have an identity of someone who's out of shape, they're in a comfort zone. Their current result matches their belief about who they are. And then 2 things often happen. One is some external influence, sometimes a spouse, says, hey, bozo, you need to lose some weight, right? So you start getting an idea, oh, I'll join the gym January 1st. This is all happening right now. They join the gym and they go and they start exercising, taking action. And when you take action, eventually, it doesn't happen overnight, but you start getting results. You feel better, you look better, you look in the mirror. But isn't it weird how many people join the gym on January 1st? They start doing something that they know is good for them. They start creating the results, which they supposedly want, but then they quit. I think it's like February 10th is the magic day. Like people just, you can go back to the gym if you're a regular member because it's not so crowded anymore. They've all gone home. And to me, this comfort zone idea is what explains that. Because if people don't make that change you were talking about to their self-image, to their identity first, if they don't make that declaration and realize that it's possible for them to be healthy, to create a different result, then when they create that new result, it actually makes them very uncomfortable. It's unfamiliar. And the best way to going back to, I mean, you said it yourself, I like my comfort zone. People like fight for their comfort zone, even if it's, I'm not making any money, or I'm unhealthy, or I'm in a terrible relationship, whatever. They fight for their own comfort zone. And to me, this model, again, helps explain that. So that's one way they make themselves uncomfortable and go back to what they were doing before. The other way is if people do what you suggested, first, Tony Robbins, right? Enthusiastic declaration, I am healthy and fit. Well, what does that voice in our head say when we do that? Like if somebody's 50 pounds overweight and, they're listening to this podcast and they go in their bathroom and they look in the mirror and they say, I am healthy and fit. What do you think they hear in their head?
I'm an idiot.
Jeff, chime in. What do you think they hear in their head?
I think they hear a little voice that says no.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he is healthy and fit, so he doesn't know that's
I nowhere near my realm.
But the same thing works in the opposite. So Jeff's an athlete, right? So he's got a self-image of an athlete.
Yep.
So
100%.
For him, and I use this example to kind of prove the point. If somebody is, they go to a meeting, they go downtown, they leave their office, they go to a meeting, the meeting runs late and they miss lunch and they're hungry. And now they got to go back to their office because they got another meeting. So they're hurrying back to their office and they're driving down the freeway and they see what we always see when we're driving down the freeway and we're really hungry, which is the golden arches, right? And what I say to people is, okay, if you're driving down the freeway and you're super hungry and you're late and you're in a hurry and you have a self-image of an unfit, out of shape person who doesn't like to exercise, are you going to go through the drive-up window at McDonald's? Probably so, right? I mean, it's quick, it's easy, it tastes good. You're not that healthy anyway. It works, right? So then if we change just one thing in the scenario, if we plug Jeff in, who has a self-image of an athlete, healthy, fit, competitive athlete, and he's gone to the same meeting, which is still run over time. He's still late. He's still got to get back to his office. His stomach is still growling. And he drives down that same highway and sees that same sign. Will he go through the drive-up window at McDonald's?
Nope.
He won't, right? Everything's the same except for that one variable called self-image. So what does the healthy, fit person do instead?
Ooh, good question. McDonald's has been trying to make a healthier menu, so maybe
so that's one thing. Yeah, absolutely. They make an effort. Although the bacon fries that they're advertising right now are not. but they do. They have made some effort to have some healthier options. So if you are going to go through the drive-up window, at least you're going to go for the healthier options. What else do those people do?
Wait to find a healthier option.
Wait. Yeah, they have the willpower, the strength to say no. They're not going to do that.
Or usually pack a healthy snack in the car. Exactly.
That's what I always hear. It's the Tupperware people, right?
Yeah.
They've got like their little snacks and bars stashed away everywhere. I can reach behind me. There's a couple of energy bars back there. Because when I get hungry, I don't want to, eat something just kind of binge eating kind of thing. But They think about it ahead of time and they have other options. They go to Subway instead of McDonald's. Not the best possible option, but it's better. And the point is that what's driving it is exactly what Dave was talking about, which is that identity, that belief about who they really are. And what they're fighting is McDonald's, is the advertising. That's one of those external influences. I always find it really interesting. I will tell that exact same story from the stage as a way to prove my point with this model. And when I get to that point of saying, they're driving down the freeway and what do they see? What do we always see when we're hungry and we're driving down the freeway? People don't say fast food. They don't say Burger King. They don't say Carl's Jr. They always say McDonald's or Golden Arches. And to me, that just proves how powerful those external influences are. Like from a very young age, they have literally hardwired us. When we're hungry, that's what we are drawn to on a less than conscious level. I don't know about you, but that's not really what I want. And I was lucky. I grew up in a house and now I'm married to a woman who's no way we're going to McDonald's. My kids didn't go to McDonald's We went on a trip down the Grand Canyon and we had a nanny taking care of our kids for a week. We came back and the kids were like, guess what we got to do? We went to McDonald's, which was fine. You know, I didn't have a problem. Like, you know, you're American, you got to have the experience, right? The one who was really, you know, who was really shocked was the nanny. Because the kids were like probably 3, 5, and 7, something like that. And we went on this trip. We were completely off the grid. And she took them to McDonald's just thinking, you know, and my kids had no idea what to do. They didn't know how it worked. Like, well, what's the deal here? Like, what? And she was like, really? You've never been to McDonald's?
You've never had a Happy Meal?
They'd never had a Happy Meal.
Yeah.
So, so some people would probably classify that as child abuse, but
no, that's smart. I mean, I think it helps too that McDonald's is one of the largest real estate companies, real estate ownership companies in America, right? I think every location, it's amazing how much they own. So it's quite often that we'll see them, see the Golden Arches in the distance. Do you think though it is this innate view of ourselves that drives those decisions? And perhaps I'm misphrasing here, but I think of it like, well, I've been to these places before and I've eaten fast food and I've felt terrible. So how much of that is it past experience as well, or is past experience part of that image that we project for ourselves?
Exactly the latter. I think where our current self-image comes from is our past experiences.
Okay.
And again, the science and the data will show that up until about 7 or 8 years old, everything that we're getting comes in completely unfiltered. You know, for the three of us at the age that we're at, you know, if somebody says, oh, you ought to go to McDonald's, it's really great food, we go, well, I'm not sure. We're going to kind of filter that and think about it and compare it to other experiences that we've had, like you said. But for a 6-year-old, it's just unfiltered. They just take it, especially from parents and teachers and clergy and things like that. They just take it as fact. So, you know, to me, the answer to your question is yes, it comes from all those experiences, but also, again, the external influences don't go away. You know, it would be great to live a perfect life and have every thought I think and every decision I make and every action I take be driven purely by my highest and best self. Not me. I don't know about you guys, but that's not my life. I mean, you know, I live in the real world. I get on the freeway. I drive in traffic. You know, I'm married for 29 years. You know, I was telling Dave, I was car shopping with my mom yesterday, who's in her 80s. You know, life goes on. Life gets tricky. I'm dealing with a car salesman. It isn't all, you know, vision and values driven. You know, it's called, you know, but to me, the power of the awareness of this whole concept that we're talking about is to give people the ability to, first of all, be aware of where they're at now, and then to start making some choices. This whole concept of personal responsibility is built into everything we're talking about. It's almost like we should have had like a preamble to this whole conversation and make sure people are bought into the concept of personal responsibility, because if they're not, all this conversation is a total waste of time. If people don't believe that they're 100% responsible for the results and the experiences they have in their life, then they're not going to be interested in all this conversation about what they can do differently to create a better life. So yeah, I told you guys, once you get me going, you can't stop me.
It's okay. Yeah. Unfortunately in America today, you got a lot of people who don't buy into the personal responsibility thing. So, but we don't have to go there.
And especially in today's world, literally today's worlds, we're seeing in the media and in our political environment, incredibly powerful modeling of not taking responsibility.
Yeah.
On a lot of different levels. And you're right. It doesn't help with getting people to embrace that concept. And in my experience, if people really want to be happy, and you know, happy is a funny word, because do you know Sean Achor? Achor. He's a Harvard guy, former Harvard professor. He wrote a book called The Happiness Advantage, and he actually goes into corporations and he teaches the importance and value of happiness. And when I heard this, I was like, that's awesome. Like, how do I get that gig? You know, that sounds like a really great gig. Because that's what I want for people is happiness. But happiness is one of those words kind of like manifesting. Like, I'm not sure I want that as my branding. But as I looked at his work, one of the things I got from him was he uses the ancient Greek definition of happiness, which is the experience of joy while in pursuit of your potential. So, and every time I tell people that, they're like, grab a piece of paper, I need to write that down, right? The experience of joy while in pursuit of your potential. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want. And for me as a parent, and I have 3 grown children, and that's like a huge like barometer for me. Like what I want is one thing, but what I want for them is even bigger. And that's what I want for them. I want to know when I go to bed at night that all 3 of my children are going through life in a way where they're experiencing joy and in pursuit of their potential. So, this pursuit of happiness, this experience of happiness, that's what it means to me. That's why, that's what I want to help people create. And I think what you're saying about happiness sometimes gets this rap like, oh, I'm broke, but I'm still smiling. Or, my wife just left me, but I'm still smiling. To me, that's not happiness. Happiness is, again, that experience of joy while in pursuit of your potential. And if people aren't willing to take responsibility for the results they're getting, I don't see how they're ever going to get there. I don't see how you're ever really, as long as you're in that mode of, because the opposite side of responsibility is blame, shame, making excuses, complaining. And to me, that's all connected to those external influences. It's someone else's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the weather's fault. It's my parents' fault, whatever. But when people are willing to let that go and take responsibility, if nothing else, they now have control of the process. They can make some change.
So I'm curious, Rob, you've covered a lot of ground, and in your years doing this and with Canfield and the work you're doing now, you must have some great stories to tell, whether they're funny stories or they're before after stories. I mean, any come to mind that relate to this, excellent decisions and before and after, or whatever, just funny. I mean, I'm kind of curious. Happy story.
Serious business. We're not talking about funny here. No, I'm kidding. I mean, and there's actually really amazing research out there about learning that when we're having fun, that when we're laughing and enjoying the process, we actually learn better. We retain the knowledge better, and we're more likely to implement it. Jack used to start all of his presentations by showing cartoons just to get the energy into that like laughing, open, ready to receive kind of energy. A lot of the stories that I tell, a lot of the stories that I share, again, as a parent, and I tell people I had an unfair advantage as a parent because I was working with Jack Canfield for those 0 to 7, 0 to 8 years of my kids growing up. I was literally hanging out and working with Jack Canfield and all of his friends. So that's my unfair advantage. And I was able to bring things to my experience of being a parent that were really different. So one story I'll share with you, and it goes back to this concept of personal responsibility. I was actually working with Jack, and we were doing a series of one-day workshops all over the country. And I realized that my youngest daughter, Lisa, who was 12 years old at the time, was really missing me. I was traveling a lot, and I could just tell that she was missing me because I was gone so much. So we made arrangements to pull her out of school for a couple of days, and she actually went on one of these trips with me. And the deal was that we had like a preparation day where I was really busy, and then we had the actual workshop day where I was really busy, but that I would add a day to the trip, and that would be just for her and I, that we would go, it was in Seattle, and we would go to the aquarium and go to the park and do all this, father-daughter time. But she would have to kind of just tag along and keep herself busy on the setup day and the actual workshop day. So that was the plan. So we went in, and she was great. She was really helpful on the setup day, and everybody loved her, and it was fun to have her along. And then the workshop day, these workshops, we'd have like 1,000 people in these workshops. So it was pretty crazy. We actually had a marching band come through the hotel one time when we were doing one of these workshops. But in this particular one, I was in the back of the room. Jack was up on stage, and he was teaching a lesson about personal responsibility. It was kind of an Eleanor Roosevelt, no one can hurt your feelings without your permission kind of lesson, where he would pick someone out of the audience, like Dave, if you were sitting in the front row, he might come up to you in front of the whole audience after kind of explaining the concept of personal responsibility and how important and valuable it is. He'd come up to to someone in the front row and he'd say, how many of you think if I came up to Dave here in the front row and I said, Dave, I've been teaching this workshop all over the world for the past 4 years, and of all the people I've ever met, you have to be the biggest jerk and idiot that I've ever met. How many of you people think that would really raise Dave's self-esteem? And nobody would raise their hand. And then he would say, well, how many of you think that might lower Dave's self-esteem? And almost everyone in the room would raise their hand. And then he would say, well, for all of you who just raised your hand, you just failed the first pop quiz about personal responsibility, because it has nothing to do with what I say to Dave. It has everything to do with what Dave says to Dave when I stop talking. So, most people, if you say you're the biggest jerk and idiot I've ever seen, they would say, oh my God, how did he figure it out so fast? My mother was right, whatever. They launch into this whole downward spiral, and it would negatively affect their self-esteem. But it's also possible, and this is probably what would happen if it happened to Dave. Dave would be sitting in the front row and he'd go, well, Jack picked me because he could tell that I'm like the most capable person in the front row here. And I'm
not exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. So in fact, it's possible that it could raise your self-esteem. But the point is that it doesn't have anything really to do with what Jack says. It has everything to do with what Dave says to himself after he hears that. So anyway, he's teaching this whole lesson, which is a really great lesson and very powerful, again, with the personal responsibility. While he's doing this, I'm walking along the back of the room. And I see Lisa, whose job is to keep herself busy. And she's sitting in a chair all the way in the back of the room. But she's not like, drawing or reading or whatever. She's got a workbook from the seminar. She's gotten a hold of one of the seminar workbooks. And she's following along, like she's listening to what Jack's saying.
And how old was she?
She was 12. 12 years old. So I sat down next to her for a minute, and at a point where there's a little pause, I said, how's it going? How are you doing? And I will never forget this. She turns to me and she looks me in the eye and said, what if all the girls in middle school really understood this? And it was just like, boom, like in that moment. And middle school, I think we all remember middle school. It's brutal, and it's getting worse all the time. These kids are being asked to make decisions about drinking and drugs and sex, and they're 12 and 13 years old. Craziness. And the bullying that goes on, and the social clicking, and those kinds of things. And for my daughter to just get it in that moment, to get the concept of personal responsibility, and to know that some other girl in her class could come up and call her whatever names she wanted, and she would be like completely immune to it. And to me, it was an example of how, first of all, how important this work is for younger people. And to have someone learn that at 12, instead of most of what I see, when I was working with Jack, most of the people in our workshops were in their 40s or 50s, and no one ever taught them this. No one ever taught them the concept of personal responsibility, or that they could make a choice, and they were letting all those, bullies, if you will, affect their thinking and affect their decisions and affect their actions.
Well, I think many of us learned the surface piece, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, but never really got the depth of what does that mean? How do you apply it? It was just a real quick, toss to us.
Yes.
And we were supposed to run with it, but
yeah, without a real understanding. And that's what I loved about the work with Jack. And I've tried to bring it into my own work. And we talked about it with comfort zones. It's great. Somebody gets up on stage. We need to get out of our comfort zone. It's so important. We need to create a whole new comfort. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, without the real understanding about what a comfort zone is and why it happens in some sort of context about, why I'm even there to begin with, how can we really expect people to just get out of their comfort zone? Especially when we're hardwired as human beings. I call it the change paradox. Like, as human beings, we always want things to change, right? We want something new. We want something different. But then as soon as something does change, we resist it. So we end up in this kind of seesaw push-pull kind of thing going on. And like, I consider all my work about awareness and choice. What I can do is I can help people be more aware of the kind of things that we're talking about today, and empower them to make choices to do something different. It's all of it. Every single thing I think I do falls into that category of increasing awareness and empowering choice. And again, because you go back to this personal responsibility piece, if people don't really get it, that's never going to happen. And to see my daughter in that situation, get it at that age. And I don't know how long it's been since you guys have seen Lisa. She's getting ready to graduate from Stanford this year. In the last year, she's been in, let's see if I can remember. She was in Norway, then she was in Greece working at a refugee camp. Then she studied for a quarter in Santiago, Chile. And then she was in Washington, D.C. doing an international studies program. And then the summer after that, she was doing an internship in Australia, where it went so well, they actually hired her to stay for an extra 3 months and be in Sydney, Australia. So,
geez, what an underachiever! How do you put up with that?
Crazy. But here's the thing: like I told you about the happiness thing, right? So, and again, as a parent, that's super cool, right? I mean, all my kids are doing these amazing things, but she also, I told you, or it was part of this conversation or a different conversation today. My older daughter, Kelly, had a water polo tournament 2 weeks ago. And Lisa made the effort to come up and spend time with Kelly while she was here, because Kelly's in grad school up in Washington, in Seattle. And so as much as Lisa's like, achieving at a really high level and doing all this amazing stuff, the other side of it, like the experience of joy part of it, is there as well. Because I got to see, first of all, that she's the type of person who wants to make the effort to come up and see her sister when she's in town. And then to see the two of them together and the way they interact and the laughter and the fun and just all that. It's exactly like they are living their lives in alignment with that definition of happiness. And like, for me as a parent, that's all I want. For me as a facilitator, that's what I want for my clients. As leaders, as individuals, I would like to know that they are experiencing joy while in pursuit of their potential, and that their organization is running in a way that they've created a culture that encourages all of their people to have the same kind of experience. I was at an event not too long ago where they talked about the difference between engagement and fulfillment. You guys probably hear the word engagement a lot, right? You're around the consulting world, nice buzzword, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it never really landed. Like, that's not really what I want. Like, it never really felt like, ooh, yeah. Like that definition of happiness when I heard it was like, ooh, right in the heart, just landed. Bullseye. Engagement was always like, yeah, it sounds good, but I'm not sure. But this guy I was hearing speak talked about the difference between fulfillment and engagement. And engagement was all about kind of productivity. It was getting more done, more on the action side. And fulfillment was much more heart-based. It was much more, and it had all the same connections, and he had the data to show even more connections to productivity and retention and satisfaction and things like that. But to me, the difference between engagement and fulfillment is the difference between kind of what my boss wants and what I really want.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I've heard it said is the difference between a career and having a calling.
Yeah.
So when it's a calling, when I teach 3 strands leadership, my little recipe for leadership, the heart of the whole system is the center one. It's meaningful work.
Right.
Same thing you're talking about.
And at any level, the person who's answering the phone can absolutely have that same feeling of doing something that's really important and really meaningful and a calling. And I love it. Like when I go into an office for a meeting and I see that person at the front desk and they're really like, I hate to use the word, but I guess they're engaged. But to me, the engagement is driven by a sense of fulfillment, like being really happy that they're there. There's a sincere level of engagement rather than, following all the policies and procedures kind of level of engagement. And I think it was Stephen Covey who said, he who is good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail. But for me, it all goes back to this concept of excellent decisions, making decisions based on vision and values. If the leader has done a really good job of developing vision and values for the company and communicating them effectively all the way to that person who's, answering the phone or greeting people at the door, those are the kind of cultures that to me are just amazing and do create that fulfillment and satisfaction, and people who stay forever and will stay late and come in early and go the extra mile, that kind of thing.
Robert, I'm really curious. What did you do to raise such high achieving kids, and what do you do with your clients to gets them really engaged? I mean, I'm a dad, and I would love to have my child exceed. What's your secret?
Well, I think a lot of the things that we're talking about today, I mean, I tell people when my kids were growing up, there wasn't like a PowerPoint presentation at dinner table every night and,
Right.
A flip chart, a pop quiz on Friday, going through the success principle one chapter at a time. We didn't do any of that. But as I look back on it, I think the fact that I was around this work and the fact that I was engaged in conversations all the time, like the conversation we're having today, that kind of bled over into the conversations. It affected the way that I showed up at home as a dad. Now, part of it was I had a really great, Dave, you know this, I had a really great role modeling from the beginning, from my own father and my mother. I had a really good start. And at the same time, all of us as parents, all we get is what we got from our parents until now. Like, one of the things I'm most excited about the time we live in now is that the information that just a couple of generations ago was only available to very few people. And then the internet comes out, and now all this information about how to be a great parent, the problem has flip-flopped. The problem is there's too much information. And you can get overwhelmed and not even know where to begin. I'm a huge believer in the fundamentals. In terms of what I really did want to share with my kids, I wanted them to really get the fundamentals. And I think the best thing we can do is model that. I'd like to tell you that I had it all planned out from the very beginning and I knew exactly what I was going to do and I followed the plan and it all turned out great. The reality is, I told you this before, I call it an unfair advantage. I had no idea at the time how much of an impact that it was having. But the fact that Lisa was with me at the time I was doing those one-day seminars created a really powerful and I think really influential moment in her life where she could look at any girl who was picking on her in middle school and not care a whit. Like, she would just not care at all. I'll tell you another story about Lisa. She played soccer in high school. And at one point, I had some really important thing I had to do work-wise. I don't remember what it was. So I told Lisa, I said, Lisa, I'm sorry, but I can't go to your soccer game tomorrow because I have, whatever I have. And Lisa looked at me and she kind of took a deep breath and she rolled her eyes a little bit. And she looked at me and she said, "You can't?" And I was like, God, busted. Right? Personal responsibility, right? Whether we're taking personal responsibility shows up in our language. So part of what I do, an exercise that I do, and I don't think I ever did it with Lisa, but she got it somehow. Maybe she saw it in that one-day workshop. I don't know. But we do an exercise with people where we have them make a list or share with a partner all the things you can't do. Like, I can't run a 4-minute mile. I can't get everything done on my to-do list. I can't get to my meetings on time, whatever. I'll just make a list or share with someone all the things you can't do, which is really easy for most people to do. And then the second part of the exercise is that we have them change the language, share the same things or write down the same things, but this time say you won't. So I won't run a 4-minute mile, or I won't get everything done on my to-do list, or I won't be on time to my meetings. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, that has a completely different experience in my body. Like, the way I think and the way I feel is completely different when I say I can't get to meetings on time, right? External influence, not my fault, too much traffic, something out of my control. And then I can just go, okay, fine, not my problem. But if I say I won't get to meetings on time, like that, talk about out of your comfort zone. That makes me uncomfortable because it reminds me that I have a choice. Like, I can do what's necessary to get to a meeting on time, which is true, right? I mean, if a meeting is important enough, if it's a game changer, huge opportunity, I will be there early. Traffic, I don't care. I will be there early, right? And when Lisa looked at me and she said, "You can't," she was calling me on that exact concept. Like, it was really easy for me to say, "I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm a really great dad and I really love you a lot, but I can't go to your soccer game." Now I'm off the hook. The truth is, I was making a choice. I was making a choice to go to a meeting instead of going to my daughter's soccer game. Doesn't that sound horrible? like, what a terrible dad I must have been, right? I was going to meetings instead of going to my daughter's soccer game. So that's why I was copping out by saying I can't, because I wasn't strong enough in that moment. Again, I'm not here to tell anyone that I've got this all wired and did everything perfectly or do everything perfectly. It happens all the time.
Nobody does.
It was so awesome. Like, I was so happy. Well, in that moment, I wasn't really that happy. But looking back on it, I was so happy that she called me on that, because she was totally right. And what it proved to me was that she really understood that concept of personal responsibility and the power of language. And she had the awareness to hear that from me, which means she hears it from herself, and to call me on it and say, you can't. And I say, okay.
So the question is, did you go to the soccer game?
I did not go to the soccer game, because it was, it was a really important meeting. And for me, like, I made it to almost all the soccer games. Yeah. There was always a really good reason if I wasn't at the soccer game. But the distinction was that she called me on being willing to, and I reframed it. I looked her in the eye and I said, okay, you got me. I'm going to make a choice. This is a really important meeting, and I know you'll understand this. And I am not going to be at your soccer game tomorrow, but I promise you I'll be at the next one. And again, that's a choice about what to do in that moment. And it's also a choice about what to do next to reaffirm that commitment to my daughter and how much I love her and how important she is to me, rather than just, oh, I can't go. Again, just write it off. Easy. Taking responsibility is often a lot easier, but
I think that's really important. It gets to kind of the heart of what the question that I was trying to ask. It sounds like what you're saying is that, it sounds like it's really important that in order to help people move, help to facilitate this type of change in people, there's a transmission between the mentor and the mentee, the parent and the daughter, the consultant and the client. It's an osmosis where the quality has to come from the person who's teaching. You have to understand what you're doing first and foremost, and through time, by presenting a good model to the people that you're working with, they start to get it slowly over a period of time. It's not somebody could probably break it down into a list of operational tasks and strategies that need to be taught to this person, but if you don't do it yourself, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and it is important again to have the awareness and have the skills to be able to do it. I'll tell you a story about my son Duncan, who is in between the two girls, and he was probably about 6 or something like that, like first grade maybe. And at the time, my older daughter Kelly, who's now in graduate school studying PhD math at a level that's so far over my head I couldn't even begin to explain it to you, but she's super academically gifted, always has been. And we were actually making a decision at the time about whether she should skip a grade in school. And again, like you were saying, they're very aware, right? There's a mentorship going on all the time, especially when they're young, whether you're aware of it or not. They're watching very carefully.
Oh, yeah.
And especially if you're living your life in a way that's admirable, I think people, even when we're older, like people kind of go, ooh, I want some of what he's having. I want to live my life more like that. I want to listen to that person. And we've all had the opposite experience where we're getting lots of advice from someone whose life is all messed up, and we're thinking maybe that's not the best person to follow their advice. But while this was going on with my older daughter, and we're trying to make a decision, there's a lot of conversation going on, and my son, who's 2 years younger, is observing all this. And at one point, I don't even remember like the exact context of the conversation, but I remember exactly what Duncan said to me. He said, Kelly is the smart one. And as a parent, like there was a part of me that wanted to kind of defend him, and say, oh, Kelly's not that smart, whatever. But that was not a really great argument to try and make, because there was too much evidence he was right. Kelly is really smart. But there was one word in what he said. He said, Kelly is the smart one. And I think I might have completely missed that if I didn't have that unfair advantage, if I didn't have the exposure to all these conversations about personal responsibility and self-image and visualization and language and all those kinds of things. But when he said that, I heard it loud and clear, and I paused him. And rather than try and get into an argument about how smart Kelly is, I said to him, is Kelly the smart one? And he got it. They're so smart, even at that age, whatever, 6 years old, he got it like in a second. And he went, oh yeah, Kelly is a smart one. Kelly's really smart. And I said, yeah, Kelly is really smart. But are you smart? He said, yeah, I'm pretty smart. And I will never forget that, because it was like a moment where he was ready to close a door. Like when he said Kelly is the smart one, he was closing the door on being smart. So he could still be the funny one, or he could still be the athletic one, or he could still be something else, but smart was already taken. Kelly had taken that. And in that one little distinction, in that one like moment of awareness and making a choice, he was able to keep that door open. And he ended up also doing really well in school. He doesn't have the kind of crazy academic side that Kelly does, but he ended up having his own experience of pursuing his potential without letting that I'm not smart belief pop in. So in answer to your question, Jeff, I think on the one hand, the mentoring and the modeling is really important, but it's also really good to continue to build our knowledge base. So when you find yourselves in that situation as a parent, where you hear something like that, or whatever, your child is faced with a situation, you're trying to help them and mentor them and coach them through it effectively, to be around the kind of work that we're around every single day, to be learning from the kind of people and reading the books and learning about change and growth and living the kind of life we want to live, I think is really, really important. So you find yourself in that situation and you're not only aware of it, but you have specific strategies that you can follow in order to do it. And to go back to your previous question in terms of how to do it, I think if I were to give someone advice as a parent, and again, it's that Stephen Covey, he who is good with a hammer thinks everything is a nail. I go back to that excellent decisions, making decisions and taking action based on vision and values rather than external stress and pressure. Kids today, I don't think there's anything we can do. We cannot protect them from all the stress and pressure. It's not going anywhere. It's getting worse, if anything. So I believe the best strategy we have is to help them be really well equipped to handle the stress and pressure. And again, based on kind of my philosophy and my point of view, the best thing we can do to help them do that is help them get really clear about their own vision, like what they want from their life. Kelly's vision is in this crazy math world that I don't even understand. Duncan's vision is in the sports world. He's working for the San Diego Padres right now. He loves being around sports and athletes. That's where he wants to be. Lisa's in this realm of international studies. She wants to travel and change the world in international way. So they're all very different, but they're clear about their vision and what's important to them. They're clear. They're still pretty young. But
so Rob, what comes first, vision or identity?
When I'm teaching it, vision comes first. And there's even something I think that comes before that, which is a desired result. I want to get healthier. I want a more fulfilling career. I want a better relationship. I want to make more money, whatever it is. There's some desire for change. If people don't have any interest in changing their life, I don't think they're listening to this podcast. They're not engaged in this conversation. But if someone has something that they want to have be different in their life, that comes first. To me, helping people with their vision is clarifying exactly what they mean by that. And the values part of it comes after that, when you connect to the feelings and emotions, the why behind it. So if what I want is to make more money, the vision is, if you do make more money, what does that look like? Am I going to be on a beach in the Bahamas? Or, what does that look like? Create a really powerful vision that I can reconnect to as something that inspires me. And then the values part of it, the what's really important to me is, how does that feel? Because the money itself or the house on the beach, none of that really has any meaning unless it makes you feel a certain way. So I think it's the goal, the outcome, clarified in the form of a vision, and then aligned with what's really important to you. Because there's lots of people that are trying to make a lot more money when they could be really happy with how much money they have now. If they just stop trying to make more money, they could be really happy and really satisfied and live a wonderful life. But all those external influencers are saying, you need to make more money, you need a bigger house, you need another car, you need whatever. Well, wait a minute, do you? Is that really what's important to you? So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the syntax for me is desired result clarified in the form of a vision and then anchored into values. And then if you look at your values and go back to your desired result, hopefully it's in alignment. Will making more money help me live a more values and vision aligned life? Then I say, go for it. How can I help you make more money? But if you don't, some people, again, they're chasing money or chasing some other goal because they think it will make them happier. When they really go into it and really connect to what's most important to them. I mean, how many people are out there trying to make a lot more money? We were joking about it with the soccer game example, but how many parents are missing their kids' soccer games, which would really make them happy? Because that's what's really important to them because they want to make more money.
I don't know. I see some parents on the soccer field sideline and they don't look very happy.
No way, really? Try softball. That was the worst.
Oh, really?
That was the worst. Of all the sports we did, softball was the one I would look around at the other parents just going, whoa, what is going on here?
Yeah, softball, baseball, I agree. Worst
and
parents.
Again, here's my daughter Lisa, and she was pitching in softball. Dave, I think you know this, but Lisa actually has an injury. When she was born, her head came out and her shoulders got stuck. And the doctor pulled her out in a way that her shoulder got damaged. She has nerve damage in her left arm. She'll never be able to fully have range of motion and strength in her left arm. And she wanted to play softball. So we were like, go for it. So she ends up playing softball and kind of figuring it out, right? It's like she couldn't really if a ball was hit, she couldn't reach up and grab it because her hand just doesn't do that. So she had to kind of figure that out. But we were... so here's Lisa. She's playing softball. She's having a great time. She's got her priorities in order. And we're seeing all these other young girls, they strike out and they're crying. They're walking back to the dugout. That's the worst thing ever. And their parents are yelling at them. And, they're never going to get that college scholarship. And Pam and I are looking at each other. What is going on here? Lisa strikes out and she's laughing. But she ended up being... Ironically, she ended up being a really good player. Again, it doesn't, having this pursuit of happiness doesn't sacrifice performance. I believe she ended up, by not getting attached to all that, oh my God, I need to get a hit every time kind of mentality, or my parents are going to yell at me, or I'm never going to get my scholarship. The fact that she was willing to do what I call letting go of attachments. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to keep learning, keep growing, always try and do better, but I'm not going to get all wound up about what doesn't go my way. She ended up having a great experience until she had a terrible coach in high school, and then she gave it up. But I used to love to watch her play. It was a great example of the stuff we're talking about, just to watch her playing softball.
Well, it reminds me of a study. I don't even know whether it was a study, but something I saw a write-up of a college professor teaching a photography class. And he divided the class in two, and he said, okay, you guys in group one are all going to be judged on quality. So, the first group was quantity. Quantity. You guys take tons of photos, do hundreds of photos. You're going to get a grade. If you have 100 or more photos, you have an A. If you have 90 or more photos, you have a B, blah, blah, blah. And they said now the second group is on quality. So you get to submit one photo for your grade. Okay. And which group do you think did better photos?
Quantity.
Quantity. That's right. Because the quantity group had a ball. They're like, okay, let's adjust this lighting. Let's try it from this angle. Let's try it from that angle. And the other group focused just on quality and stressing out of, I've got to get it just right.
Yep.
They were mediocre.
I mean, if there was a 12-step program for recovering perfectionists, I'd be going to meetings. I can totally relate. I want everything to be perfect. Jim Rohn, who was an amazing speaker, he died a few years back, but he used to say anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And when I first heard that, again, I want everything to be perfect before I do it, right? But that was such a powerful thing for me to hear. Anything worth doing, again, vision and values, if it's really important to you, if you want to get a great photograph, it's worth doing poorly. Try it. See how it goes. Adjust. If it didn't work, do something different. The whole concept of failure, to me, that's what's built into that story is, be willing to do something wrong. We used to say, there's two kinds of feedback, right? Good feedback and bad feedback. And which would you rather get? Most people would say good feedback, right? I'd rather have encouragement and positive and you did a great job and all that stuff that gives self-esteem work a bad name in the classroom, right? We're not supposed to tell kids what a great job they're doing. But have you ever gotten value from negative feedback?
Oh, yeah.
And that's where people go, ooh. But if you're never willing to make a mistake, you're never going to get that feedback. And chances are you're never going to cross that bridge we talked about and make a decision and do something. You're afraid. So anyway, that's definitely one of those areas where I'm still a work in progress. My perfectionist tendencies come out and I'm like, just do it. Publish the video. Do the workshop. It won't be perfect, I promise.
Robert, what would you give advice for anybody out there who's trying to put into practice these bits and pieces of wisdom that you're giving them? Any last words of advice?
Well, one thing we haven't really talked about, I think we've talked about this more from kind of the 30,000 foot level. And when I talk to people about the work that I do, and you've heard me talk about excellent decisions, are decisions driven by vision and values instead of stress and pressure. The real intention, like why we do that, in my language, is to help people thrive, which means, as I define thrive, it's achieving at a really high level, but also being truly happy. And again, I told you about the definition of happiness that I use. So making excellent decisions with the intention of thriving and being truly happy is the game that I feel like I'm playing, which is all kind of, elevator speech. I'm going to a meeting tonight. I'll be telling people that. But at some point, people want to know kind of the how, like, how do you do that? And the process that I use is to, first of all, help people get really clear about where they are now. Most people have a tendency to either over-exaggerate on the positive side, how great things are for them now, or exaggerate in the other direction, how horrible and doom and gloom things are. So getting people to see it from both sides and just get really honest with themselves about where they're at now, what's working and what could be working better. The second step is to help people get clear about what they want, like that desired outcome, and then to go in and get clear about their vision and their values, and in some cases, their value. Like there's a difference between values and value, and especially if people are working on goals in the area of money and finance and career, it's really important that they're clear about not just their vision, what they want, their values, why it's important, but their value, like what they're going to give in return for that additional income that they're going to get. And then the step after that is to have them do what I call letting go of attachments, to look at the things that are getting in their way now, which is often concern about what other people will think. For me, that's the part where genuine gratitude for what we already have comes in, because the best way to not be attached and need to make more money or need to lose weight is to just be genuinely grateful for what we have now. And then the last three steps are about getting into taking action, which is strategizing, coming up with a plan, making a decision, and taking action, getting feedback, and surrounding yourself with the support that you really need. So in terms of answering your question, I think it's hard to pick one thing, because at any step along that process, people can identify work that would be helpful to do. For some people who are totally new to this conversation, starting at the beginning and getting really clear just about where they're at now and what it is that they want to have be different would be the place to start. A lot of times we're talking to people who have been around a lot of this work and they've done the vision and values work. They've gotten pretty clear about where they're at now and what they want to have different. And it's time to really get in and strategize on how to do that. But in terms of what people can really do to make that happen, I think the final step in the process, which is about surrounding yourself with support, encouragement, also people who will just be honest with you about what would be helpful for you to do, and also accountability. It's just true that most of us will do things when we're accountable to other people that we just won't do. Those things that are outside of our comfort zone, sometimes we just won't do them unless we're accountable to someone else. So putting the structure in place so that we can have the support and the accountability and the encouragement to keep moving forward, to keep taking action, to keep taking more photographs until we find one that really, really works. So
it sounds like
a little bit like answering your question and dodging it at the same time, but there's so much that we can do. So
it sounds like a big part of your journey has been working with and learning from people that are pretty good at a lot of this stuff, or at least they're trying to be, and they're teaching it and sharing it. And there's a symbiotic benefit to both of it's whoever you're working with or a group. And that sounds really important too.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And again, I feel like I've been very blessed in terms of the people that I've had the opportunity to work with and learn from. I look back over the last 20 years or so, it's mind-boggling to think of the people that I've had the opportunities to connect with. And some of those are people who I've never met. And again, the world we live in today, like I consider Deepak Chopra to be one of my greatest teachers. I love his work. He wrote a book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, which is just good, solid, fundamental, great stuff. I've never met him, but I consider him one of my teachers because I have audio, I have a book, and he's been one of my teachers. And any of us can do that. You know, people are listening to this podcast. On some level, we are acting as mentors and teachers in hosting this conversation. I would also kind of like to bring up too, though, that there's a little bit of a dark side to that, because the other thing that I've seen in the time that I've been around that's probably the most frustrating thing is that there are some teachers out there who are brilliant marketers and tell us all the things that we really want to hear and make a lot of really big promises. But if you really, I call it the Wizard of Oz effect, if you peek behind the curtain and you see how that person is really leading their life and how they're interacting with other people, you'll sometimes find that people are not living what they really teach. So again, the good news is there's so many teachers out there. There's so many programs and material and information out there. It's great. But I always encourage people to be really picky and really do your homework. When you're going to kind of bring a teacher or a mentor into your life, make sure that it's the right one, and make sure it's people who really are living the principles that they teach rather than just leaning in. There's a great cartoon out there about a bookstore where there's a whole shelf of personal development. There's another shelf about helping other people improve their lives. And we would want to work with people. It's one of the things that was amazing about working with Jack Canfield. If Jack were listening to this podcast, even though I'm one of his students, he would be sitting there with a pen and a pad of paper to make notes and capture what he could learn from this conversation. So that's the kind of people I want to surround myself with.
That's great. Dad, do you have anything?
No, I think, this podcast is with Robert and hear his thoughts. I think that's a great thought to end it with. I mean, that here you got Jack Canfield who sold millions of books and come up with a lot of great strategies, life strategies that work. And, Robert's been able to take some of those and adapt them a bit and put his own flavor on them. And he's having tremendous impact in people's lives. But he mentioned that even Canfield is still a learner. And he's not too proud to sit down and listen to one of his students and take notes and see what he can be reminded of or what he can learn that's new. I think it's a great way to end.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Robert, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. It was a blast. Happy to help your community in any way I can. And I'm sure we'll be continuing the conversation behind the scenes one way or another.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on the podcast again too. How can people connect with you? Your website, social media, anything they want to get in touch with you?
I don't really do that much on social media. I do have a presence on Facebook and LinkedIn. But in terms of those external influences, I'm hyper aware of how those platforms are often designed to heavily influence the way we think and how our time is used. So I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I have intentionally kept my company very small. I'm very nimble. I don't have 27 gatekeepers. So if people go to excellentdecisions.com, it's very easy to connect with me. And again, if people have questions or comments or something they'd like to share, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, we can wrap it up. I'll stop the recording. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks, Rob.
Yep.